And I ask consent that the senator from Kentucky and myself be allowed to participate in a colloquy.
Without objection.
Mr. President, just say to my friend from Kentucky, I've had over 50 hospital town hall meetings in our state over the last year and a half. You and I have done a couple of these together. And as a healthcare professional yourself, looking at it from a hospital and healthcare provider point of view, which you and I have both had, either you in your profession or me, by being in these hospitals a lot the last couple of years, I learned a good bit. What do you think is the most devastating impact of Obamacare on the provider world?
Well, you know, I talk to a lot of doctors, and I have been in town halls with you at the different hospitals. The hospitals are concerned that if everybody goes on Medicaid, they'll go out of business. Many hospitals' bottom line is driven by they can take care of the poor through Medicaid, but they rely on private insurance to make a profit. And hospitals in most communities have to make a profit to stay in business. So the rural hospitals, particularly in small areas, some of them have already gone bankrupt in Kentucky, but they're very concerned about people being shifted from private insurance to public assistance. You know, the president says, oh, it'll be free, but it has a cost. We all pay for it through higher taxes, and the other way we pay for it is we have to ration care or ration what we pay for care. So we have to limit what we pay hospitals. Hospitals are already being forced to less. They have been for a while, but even more so now. Same with doctors. And then how do doctors respond? Doctors, some respond by saying, well, I'm either going to see only a couple of Medicaid patients or no Medicaid patients. And then when everybody's on Medicaid, or the vast majority are Medicaid, they're going to be waiting in line, you know, to get to see a doctor.
Well, you know, speaking of Medicaid, I remember reading that our governor got teared up when he announced he had decided to accept the additional Medicaid mandate, which the Supreme Court actually had said was optional. I remember having a teared up feeling too, but for a different reason. Because I gather what will happen in our state is there are going to be between 300,000 and 400,000 new people with free health care cards rushing toward the emergency rooms. And what I heard in a number of my town hall meetings is they can't handle the Medicaid load that they have now, not to mention all of these new people who are headed their way, coupled with the $750 billion in health care provider cuts over the next 10 years to help provide subsidies for people who are not old. I mean, this coming out of Medicare to provide subsidies for people who are not old. What's your take on where this all heads?
Well, it's kind of, when you look at the big picture of this, when we say, well, we want to provide health insurance for everybody, which I think is a noble cause. But you look at what we have. The government already provides for Medicare for everybody over 65. But Medicare is $35 to $40 trillion short. Why? It's nobody's fault, really. We're just living longer, and a lot of people are retiring. So we have a big baby boomer generation. But Medicare is $35 trillion short. So we are instituting a new entitlement, a brand new entitlement, very big, biggest we've had in 50 years. We're going to pay for it by shifting money from Medicare that's already $35 trillion short. That alone should give people pause. The other thing that I think should give people pause is we can't get people to sign up for this free program. The president's going to spend tens of millions of dollars on TV promoting it, hiring people to come knock on your door to beg to sign up for something free. You know something's disorganized if people won't take something that's free.
This bill was also sold, as we both recall, as doing something about health care costs. And I was just noticing here that HHS's own actuaries revised their projections just last week to say that Obamacare will actually increase health costs by $621 billion out across the economy. Is there any way, I would say to my colleague, Dr. Rand Paul, how this could possibly hold down costs?
No, and in fact, I think, you know, there were problems in health care, but as a physician for 20 years, what I heard most was the cost of health care. People came to me and said, it's so expensive. Or if they were a small business owner, they said, our insurance costs too much. That was their main complaint. This does nothing to control costs. In fact, Obamacare does the opposite. Obamacare is a collection of mandates. So I was talking earlier, it's a difference between freedom and coercion. It will coerce insurance companies and customers to buy only certain kinds of insurance. And people say, well, oh, I think it's good. My kids will be covered when they're in college, when they get out of college. Well, yeah, that's good, but it's not free. It's going to cost you more money. So if you're the working class or the working poor and you're struggling to buy insurance, it's going to cost you more. And so he always says he's for the middle class. The middle class are going to pay more for their insurance. They already had insurance, and they're going to pay more across the board. And so really, there are a lot of problems, and this bill does nothing to control costs.
Well, you know, one of our constituents, I was going to mention here a letter, you probably got it from the same constituent I did, to kind of underscore how the rising cost is impacting people outside the healthcare provider world, regular people in business. This is from a fellow constituent of ours who writes, "My father began his Kentucky Fried Chicken business with the Colonel himself and with the Colonel's family. Says, we proudly served Colonel Sanders' original recipe for 40 years, and it saddens me, however well-intentioned, that this law will undermine my ability to provide employment, and it will deplete resources that could otherwise be used to grow my business." You and I both heard from a lot of Kentucky business people indicating, as this KFC franchisee underscores, the impact of this on the private sector.
Well, I met with a group today, and I have here 68,000 Americans, senior citizens, who signed a petition from Conservative 50+ Alliance saying they want to delay it, dismantle it, defund it, do anything, just try to slow down this monstrosity. We've also heard, both you and I, from folks who work for UPS, one of our biggest employers in Louisville and Kentucky. 15,000 spouses losing their insurance coverage from UPS. But they had chosen, it was great coverage. UPS is a great company, great benefits, but they're forced to cut back because of Obamacare. We hear from individuals throughout the state. We've gotten thousands and thousands of letters. One couple I met recently was actually profiled on Fox News, the Mangione family, who they said, look, we have to buy our insurance. We're self-employed, we do consulting work, we were paying $300 a month, we're going to $900 a month. This is exactly the opposite. And one of the real things that we had that was working in our healthcare and that should be expanded if we were in charge of talking about this is health savings accounts. People could save for things that weren't covered by their insurance, straightening your kids' teeth, you know, cosmetic, elective kind of surgery, your deductible, meeting a lot of things through a tax-free account. We had made it bigger and bigger over time. Obamacare makes it smaller. If you've got a kid with autism or spina bifida or special needs, you need to save that money tax-free so you can help your child with all the extra stuff you need to do for your child. The president has narrowed that. Also, health savings accounts help to bid prices down, because then you have a higher deductible, you call up the doctor, you say, how much will that be? Or you ask the pharmacist, how much does that cost? That simple question of asking how much something costs is concern on the part of the consumer, drives prices down, but we've gotten rid of that.
Yeah, you know, the other thing that's clearly happening here is that all indications are we have a record number of part-time employees in our country now. Employers are downsizing in order to try to get below the 50-employee threshold. And of course, even as they do that, they're not necessarily unaffected by the rising cost of health insurance premiums, but looking around in some way to try to prevent the worst case scenario here. All of this disruption in our economy is actually the reason we have so many part-time workers, is it not?
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, there was a French philosopher by the name of Bastiat, and he talked about the seen and the unseen. You may be able to, and I'm sure the president's going to show us the person who gets insurance. That's the seen. That'll be the good effect of this. The unseen will be the person who doesn't get the job, but you don't know their name because they never got the job. The person that was going to be the 51st employee or the 52nd employee, or the part-time worker that had 34 hours going to 29 workers. See, that's the unseen. And I don't question the motives of the president or the other side. I think they want to help people, but they didn't think this thing through. So even their side now is questioning it. Authors of the bill calling it a train wreck. The Teamsters saying, well, we didn't know we have to pay all these taxes on our health insurance. Warren Buffett, the former President Clinton, all these people questioning, boy, this is really going to hurt some of the people you tried to help. And that's one of my concerns, and I know there's been a lot of talk about procedure around here, is that we ought to have ability to amend this, to make it less bad is what I like to describe it, make this bill less bad for the American people. But the other side, there's been a lot of dialogue on our side, but there hadn't been much on theirs. Are they willing to talk about fixing Obamacare, making it less bad for the American people?
Yeah, you were not here yet, but you're fully aware of how this bill passed in the first place. Not a single member of our party in either the House or Senate voted for it. They brought us into session the day after Thanksgiving in 2009, and we were not allowed to leave for a month. We were here 7 days a week for a month. Managed to eke it out. They had 60 Democrats, there were 40 Republicans. Eke it out with not a vote to spare on Christmas Eve as a result of things like the Cornhusker kickback, a special deal for Nebraska, the Louisiana Purchase, a special deal for Louisiana, the Gator Aid, a special deal for Florida, all while the president, the vice president, former President Clinton were up here telling us, believe me, they're going to love it by the fall. Well, here we are 4 years later, and it's more unpopular today, I would say to my friend from Kentucky, than it was on the day it was passed. And I think, isn't it reasonable to conclude that's because of what it does?
Absolutely. It's the content, but it's also because there has been no input. Obamacare is 100% the president's bill, 100% the work of the Democrats, with no input from our side. And I think people actually do. You go home and they do want us to have some dialogue. They do want us to work together a little bit. There's been no working together on Obamacare. It's theirs. And the president, I think, got it, exactly wrong the other day. And it's bad, I think, to misinform the people this way. He said Republicans want 100% of what they want, or they're going to shut down government. I think it's the opposite. He wants 100% of what he wants. He doesn't want any compromise. We have a bill before us. There is a discussion about Obamacare. Why not? Nearly 80% of us voted and said the medical devices tax is going to be a disaster for innovation in the medical industry. It's a bad piece of this bill. We should repeal it. Why not have a vote on that? But to my understanding, there will be no vote on any amendments to make Obamacare any better.
Well, the president himself seems to be kind of conceding that some things aren't working out well. He decided to delay the employer mandate for a year. Apparently, he's been meeting with some of his union allies to figure out what he can try to do for them. I believe the 100% view of Republicans is that if we're going to have a delay for business, why not have a delay for everybody? Right. Everybody. I mean, obviously, we'd like to defund the law entirely. There's a math problem on that in the Senate. There are 54 Democrats and 46 Republicans. But couldn't we all agree on just delaying this train wreck? The train wreck, by the way, was what the Democratic chairman of the Finance Committee here in the Senate, one of the authors of the bill, called it.
And I think there's also something important about, how we change Obamacare. If a law has problems and we incorrectly passed a law that has, to say the least, blemishes, it should come back and we should redebate and fix it, or try to make it less bad, I think is the best way to put it. But the thing is that it is illegal and it is unconstitutional and it is unprecedented for a president just to do this on his own. And to my mind, win or lose this week, this is an important philosophical battle, bigger than Obamacare. It's as big and broad as the country is, and that's whether or not Congress writes the law and the president executes the law. If the president gets to both write and execute, that's a type of tyranny. Montesquieu talked about the separation of powers, and he said when the legislative power becomes the executive power, that's a type of executive tyranny. We have to do something that says to the president, and that's why I think this needs to be pursued all the way to the Supreme Court, and rebukes the president and says, you are not a king. You're the president, and the legislation comes from Congress, not from you.
Well, we've got another example of that affects our state. The president, even when he had 40-seat majority in the House and 60 votes in the Senate, couldn't get cap and trade through the Congress. Couldn't get it through the Congress. Yet last Friday, he's announced he's going to do it anyway. And all indications are there won't be another coal-fired generation plant built ever. Perfect example of what you're talking about, kind of executive arrogance, that if I can't get what I want through Congress, I'll just do it on my own and see you in court, or whatever limited options we have left. look, if he really believes he's got the power to delay Obamacare, why not delay it for everyone, not just businesses?
Right. And I think that's what people see as unseemly. They see, well, gosh, if there are problems, is it right for him to just give exemptions to his friends? And you see a line of people going to the White House that were big contributors of his, and it's like, can you really buy access to good law? Can the president change the law only for people who gave him money? Can he give out grants and loans to people who are his contributors? And I think that's what sort of belies this tale when he says, oh, I'm for the middle class. Well, I don't see the middle class. I don't see my neighbors or any of my friends getting any special deals at the White House. In fact, I see them bearing the brunt of people who do get special deals. I don't like if you have really good health insurance, placing a tax on you, a special tax. Many of the unions will get that. I would stand here and fight tooth and nail not to have a special tax on the unions. Some might be surprised by that, but it's not for me a union, non-union thing. It's about, is it good for America? Is it good for Americans? Some executives have good insurance too. Should we have a special tax on something good? It doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
Well, you know, here at some point, regardless of the differences of opinion that we've had on our side over procedure, what's likely to happen here at some point is we're going to have a 51-vote vote on defunding Obamacare, something we've not been able to achieve here in the last 4 years. And, you know, 4 Democrats who had second thoughts, who had an opportunity to take a look at the carnage of the last 4 years, could actually pass a bill that defunds Obamacare. I remember I say to my friend and colleague standing at this very chair 4 years ago, looking at the other side and saying, if just one of you, just one, would come with us, this bill wouldn't pass. And I also said, however, if none of you do, every single one of you is responsible for its passage. Had any Democrat on the other side, any one of them, said this is a bridge too far, I'm not going to do it, it wouldn't have passed. So consequently, every single one of them was responsible for its passage, but they have a second choice, a second chance now. An opportunity for a do-over at some point here this week. They'll have a chance to cast a real vote on an up or down basis to say, look, I've watched this for 4 years and I don't really think we ought to go forward. Right. And it'll be interesting to see if party loyalty will be so great that none of these folks will be able to bring themselves to admit that they made a mistake 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I think one of the disappointing things about the debate, both then and now, is that we're talking about something that all Americans want. They want affordable health care. They want most people to have insurance. They want everybody to have insurance if we can do it. But we've made it a partisan battle, not we, but the Congress and the deliberative process has become very partisan, when in reality there are probably things that we could agree. Even the problems with Obamacare, I think half of the other side agrees that there are problems and they ought to be fixed. But because of sort of some kind of stubbornness that we're getting 100% of what we want, or we're willing to risk shutting down the government, that's what we get from the other side, is that it's their way or the highway. They want all of Obamacare or they want the government to shut down. And I think really in reality there's a lot of good things that we could actually come together and work on, because really Obamacare never addressed price. There's 85% of the public had insurance and their price is going up. So really we do need to get together and talk about how we try to bring cheaper health care for people in our country.
You know, the tragedy of all this, correct me if I'm wrong, but we passed a 2,700-page bill on a totally partisan basis. Got about 20,000 pages of regulations now issued. I used them in a speech recently that were 7 feet tall. We had to put them on a dolly to get it out on the podium. And I would ask my friend and colleague from Kentucky, didn't I read the other day that even after we do all of this, the 2,700-page bill, the 20,000 pages of regulations, there's still maybe 25 or 30 million people uninsured?
Yeah, I don't think it's actually fixed the problem. It's, you know, I think we were at 45, so I don't think we fixed half of the problem. The other interesting thing is, of the people who didn't have health insurance, a third of the people without health insurance were young, healthy, and actually made more than $50,000 a year. They weren't getting health insurance because it was too expensive. So what did we do to help them? We made health care more
expensive.
expensive.
Well, look, I think this law has no chance of working. I don't believe that even if we are unable to defund it here in the next few days, that we're necessarily stuck with it. I've been here a while, and you've been a long-time observer through your father's career and your own. And I think it's pretty safe to conclude that things that can't work don't stick, don't last, because we are, after all, a representative democracy. People complain and discuss and tell us how they feel. I don't think this law can possibly stand. It's pretty hard to predict exactly the day upon which it ends, but it's cracking. When you've got Jimmy Hoffa, the president of the Teamsters Union, saying you're destroying the 40-hour work week, and their Cadillac health care plan, don't you think this thing can't possibly work?
No, and I think once the bills come due at the state level, you're going to have a real uproar on your hands, because there's a printing press in Washington that runs 24 hours a day printing money. In the state capitals, they don't have a printing press. They're limited, at least to a certain extent, on their borrowing. When the Medicaid bills come due in Kentucky, our state, and other states, it is really, I think there'll be another war over Obamacare. And the question then will be, do we throw out the governor who increased our Medicaid by 50% and bankrupted our state in the process?
Well, I thank my colleague from Kentucky for the opportunity to exchange some views here about the impact of this on our state and our country. And Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Well,